Women are absolutely incredible, and the women I want to talk about today for Women's History Month are absolutely amazing. They were mothers, they were sisters, they were wives, and they were revolutionaries. They called themselves las Mariposas, the butterflies, but these sisters didn't flutter. They fought a dictator, defied oppression, and unfortunately ended up dying for their freedom. Today's story is about the Mirabal Sisters, the fearless women whose martyrdom helped bring down one of Latin America's most brutal regimes. Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa were born in the Dominican Republic to two upper-middle-class parents. Their parents were farmers and shop owners, and they grew up fairly comfortably, despite the fact that they were growing up in the despotism of the regime run by Rafael Trujillo. Trujillo, known as El Jefe, ruled the Dominican Republic with absolute power, brutal repression, and a cult of personality from 1930 to 1961. He came to power through a military coup and used the Dominican Republic's army as his personal tool so that no one could oppose him. He tried to make himself seem larger than life. He fostered an intense cult of personality. He renamed streets, cities, and landmarks after himself. His portraits were displayed everywhere, and he used the state-controlled media to spread propaganda glorifying his leadership and silencing anybody who might speak out against him. If anybody did speak out against him, his regime was infamous for torturing, imprisoning, and even assassinating political opponents. The Mirabal family was high enough socially to be on Trujillo's radar. And so when he came to their home, when they were hosting a reception, he noticed that there were no pictures of him. And he assumed that meant that they were disloyal. And so they were put on a list of dissidents. In retaliation for their disloyalty, one of the sisters, Minerva, and their parents were arrested and their property was seized. This was enough to revolutionize Minerva, who decided that she was going to do everything she could to fight this cruel dictator. After finishing her schooling, she decided she wanted to go to law school so that she could fight for the rights of those who could not fight for themselves. Her parents told her no because they were very worried that she'd get involved in politics and ultimately be killed. However, after 6 years, they relented and she enrolled at the University of Santo Domingo and became the first woman in the Dominican Republic to earn a law degree. Unfortunately, because Trujillo had it out for her, she was not allowed to receive her license to practice law. Patria, the oldest sister, was born in 1924, and when she was 17, she married Pedro Gonzalez. He was a farmer who would help in the fight against the Trujillo regime. She had 3 children, and she stood up to fight for them. She said, "We cannot allow our children to grow up in this corrupt and tyrannical regime. We have to fight against it, and I'm willing to give up everything, even my life if necessary." She was deeply religious and completely devoted to her family, but she simply could not remain silent in the face of this injustice. The second daughter, Dere, was born in 1925 and was the only sister to survive the Trujillo regime. She was not directly involved with the resistance, but she did support her sisters. She was the financial sort of backbone for the family, and after her sisters were killed, she became the keeper of their legacy to make sure that it lived on. Minerva was the third daughter, and she was born in 1926, and she was the fiercest rebel in the group. Her biggest crime, other than not having a picture of El Jefe in the house, was that when she was very young and he was much older than her, she rebuffed his advances. She was arrested and harassed multiple times on orders given by Trujillo himself. The youngest sister, Maria Teresa, was born in 1935. She was passionate, she was idealistic, and she joined the resistance despite her young age. She wanted to follow in her sister's footsteps. She said, "Perhaps what we have most near is death, but that idea does not frighten me. We shall continue to fight for that which is just." The sisters were deeply involved with the 14th June movement, which was created to support and in honor of Dominican rebels who were killed while attempting to overthrow Rafael Trujillo. Everyone in their family, including Patria's children, helped to deliver information and help people understand why the regime needed to end. The sisters were known as las Mariposas, or the butterflies, and they were key figures in the movement. They were heavily involved in smuggling weapons and materials to aid the resistance. They helped to organize and recruit new members and put themselves at great personal risk to keep the movement going on. Not long after the group was formed, they were found meeting in Patria's house, and the house was burned to the ground. Maria Teresa and Minerva were arrested. Patria was not arrested, but her husband and her teenage son were. Minerva and Maria Teresa were released from jail. However, their husbands were soon arrested after being ambushed by the secret police. On November 25th, 1960, after visiting their husbands, Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa were ambushed. During this brutal attack that was ordered by Trujillo and carried out by his secret police, they were beaten, strangled, and killed. The police staged their murders as a car accident to try and cover up what had happened, but it was too much. The murder of the Mirabal Sisters sparked outrage across the Dominican Republic. Their murders became a turning point in the fight against Trujillo, and just 6 months later, on May 30th, 1961, he was assassinated, and his brutal dictatorship finally came to an end. The sisters became symbols of resistance and female empowerment throughout Latin America and the world. Dede worked tirelessly to keep the legacy of the sisters alive, and now, the day of their assassination is recognized as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The Mirabal sisters sacrificed their lives for the freedom of their people. They stood up against a tyrant, knowing it would cost them everything, and their story continues to inspire activists, feminists, and freedom fighters everywhere. They didn't just fight oppression. They became symbols of ending it.